folks. Welcome back to another Church Reset read-through. We're getting down towards the end. Just 3 chapters left, and then I believe the conclusion. I should know, I wrote the book, but it's been a little while. But yeah, getting through it pretty quickly. I need to get on to starting to plan out the next series, but I'm looking forward to that one when we get to it. I've told you before about McGarvey's treatise on the eldership. You can grab that on Amazon if you want to. Grab yourself a copy before we get to it here on the Church Reset podcast and the Focus Press YouTube channel. As always, if you're watching, click like. If you're catching this on Substack, you can click like there as well. Obviously, always helps. I don't know how all the algorithms work and all that, but be sure you're subscribed and click like when you see it. So we're going to go ahead and get into this week's video, this week's chapter, I should say, on Christ-likeness and the way we get there, that it's not just something that happens, obviously, but how do we make that happen? How do we cultivate that in our people? So the chapter is entitled Teaching Christ. Let's go ahead and start off with the lead-off quote there from Robert E. Coleman. Amazing as it may seem, all Jesus did to teach these men his way was to draw them close to himself. He was his own school and curriculum. When you think about that, Jesus walked with them, spent time with them, had them follow him and see what he did, and it wasn't a classroom setting, it wasn't textbooks, it wasn't things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but it really is picked up in life. So let's pick up from there. I believe everybody wants to see a church model like what's been described thus far. The idea of the church having the kind of close-knit relationships needed in order to practice the one another's is one that is likely exciting to many. Having a church full of people practicing evangelism is every minister and elder's dream. Seeing the power of God at work in our efforts is something we all desire. The question that remains, and the question upon which this book's usefulness depends, is, how do we get there? Before we do anything, we have to come to the realization that a change is necessary. As the saying goes, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Similarly, there's the ever-popular line, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And, as always, the Bible says it best. You reap what you sow. Galatians 6:7, paraphrased. Going back to the Bible means first dropping any baggage we have. If we neglect to do that, we'll end up right back at the same conclusions we held before. When you go back to the various passages we've examined on God's vision for the church, there is no concept of the business-like church we know. The biggest mistake we could make, and one we will be tempted to make, is try to shoehorn this kind of family-oriented, disciple-making centered structure into what we already do in our business-like churches. We have to drop the baggage. I've got some thoughts on that. I'll save it for later in the chapter when it gets a little more into it, of kind of this hybrid model of trying to be a disciple-making group inside of the current paradigm. So we'll get to more of that. Continuing. Why? Because trying to combine family with the business-like model we know simply won't work. It's like trying to install Mac software onto a Windows machine. The operating system isn't equipped to run what the software tries to do. The message doesn't fit the method. If we're going to help each other stop thinking of church as a building, an event, or an organization, we have to stop treating it as those things and start treating it like the family, body, and priesthood it was meant to be. If we want to remove the producer-consumer split and truly pursue a priesthood of all believers, we're going to have to retrace our steps all the way back to step 1 and restart there. What then is step 1? We'll pause right there just to give some thoughts on that. It's kind of the, all right, I want to be closer to Jesus, I want to be more like Christ, I want a more family-like church. How do I do that in 60 minutes a week? You're not going to get there. It's going to cost something. You can't shortcut it, you can't program it, you can't come up with just an easy way out to get there. And so that's something that I think has been tried. I think these terms, as we'll talk about, the disciple-making thing, boy, that's really popular. Everybody likes these ideas. How do we do it without asking more commitment from people, without getting more time from people, without those kinds of things? What are we doing here? What are we really looking for? So let's continue on, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to get to that idea some more. We practice the Great Commission. It was what the church was built to do, and it's my contention that a thorough, patient application of it results in churches made up of people imitating Jesus. God is smarter than we are. It only makes sense that when we pursue the mission He gave us, we get the results He expects from us. As Ephesians 4:11-16 teaches us, each one is to be equipped to grow to the point where they too are involved in the building up of the church. We aim to be people who love Jesus, want to be like Jesus, and desperately want to show everybody what He looks like. All of us. What we should aim to see is Christians doing the work of the one another's in evangelism organically, as a natural part of their lives rather than as a scheduled event someone else put on for them. Of course, we all desire to see this. Every preacher I know wants those in his congregation to be like Christ. We preach sermons on the need for evangelism and teach classes on how to practice it. We teach on loving one another. We emphasize the importance of attendance and commitment to the church. We work hard to instill Bible knowledge in people. And those who are mature Christians long to see their fellow Christians practice Christianity alongside them. Still, by and large, there's a frustration that the results are so hit or miss. As one preacher friend put it, we huddle up on Sunday, call the play, and then go out on the field and stand still instead of running the play. Next Sunday comes, we huddle up again and start the cycle all over. The question then gets a bit more specific. How do we practice the Great Commission? How do we set that cycle in motion? This is where the method and the message either reinforce one another or undermine each other. To continue doing what we've always done is to ensure that it doesn't get done. The solution to almost everything has been to get people in a room and have someone speak to them. Not only do we have sermons and classes, but we have gospel meetings, seminars, lectureships, workshops, and retreats. For years, it's been my default course of action too. We'll add another class for those who want to go in depth. We'll move the schedule around to try to teach those who aren't as committed. We'll have a speaker come in and address a certain topic to hopefully get people fired up. The onus is then on each listener to do with it what they will, but a 24/7 faith can't be taught in half an hour per week. An annual weekend seminar isn't going to bring anybody to maturity. One-size-fits-all lessons can't possibly fit everybody. Study the New Testament's teaching on what the church is supposed to be, and you'll quickly come to two conclusions. First, it's going to take much more than a Sunday and Wednesday gathering where most members are passive. And second, we're going to have to think outside the four walls of the building. Ultimately, we have to do what Jesus did. When we say things like that, in speaking on it, I've seen people's eyes glaze over like, how much do I got to do? How much do I have to be at the building? How many nights of the week do I have to surrender to make this happen? I mean, just all of those questions, and they're fair questions. But what all are you expecting me to do? It really isn't a every night of the week. I'll concede the Acts 2 thing day to day. We're probably not in each other's homes every single day in this culture, no matter what we do. It's just we're not built that way right now. It's way less we're going to schedule you out 6 nights a week, and more being open to the idea, having those opportunities, taking those opportunities to spend time or to just go along with somebody to do things together. It's a mindset that does create more time together, but you're not going to be scheduled and marked down for 15 hours a week or anything like that. When it starts happening organically, you just see this is not, some ridiculous, unfair commitment that you're being asked to make. And I think that's important that people get that. When we talk about giving more, it's not just, well, kiss your life away, kiss your life goodbye, because it's all going to be taken up in church work. It has to be part of our lives, which involves realigning our lives from this 21st century go mindset, yes, but we need to do that anyway, whether it's for church work, whether it's for our families, whether it's for our own peace of mind. Everybody needs a little bit of a break if you're really stuck in that rat race. And so this is not just for church matters, but in general, what kind of lives are we living, and is it possible to live Christ-like lives with that much on our plates? Let's continue. How did Jesus make disciples? For him, disciple-making was a lifestyle. He gave sermons and taught crowds, but among the crowds he was received with the same kind of fickle consumerism we see today, precisely the kind of thing we're aiming to avoid. He knew that the work that was going to last was that which was most personal. For that reason, he chose the 12, walking with them, teaching the truth about himself, answering their questions, setting an example for them, and expecting them to join him in the work. Even among those, he had an inner circle of 3 who became the most prominent members of the church's launch at the beginning of Acts. Jesus was the greatest preacher and teacher of all time, yet nowhere do we see him saying, "All right, that's your kingdom class for this week. Go act on what you heard, and I'll see you next Sabbath." If he did not expect deep, abiding change and equipping to come solely from a lesson given to the crowds, neither should we. You just, where on earth do you get in Jesus' ministry this idea of, all right, everybody sit down, I'll teach you for an hour, and that ought to suffice? It really, and of course he was equipping missionaries. He was equipping people that were going to be doing the full-time work, that were going to take on that Ephesians 4:11 role as apostles, prophets, teachers, evangelists, all of those things for sure. And there's more to that than there is for the average Christian. But even from that, the idea that somebody's personal life is going to be brought to where it needs to be with God just by sitting and listening once a week, that you just don't see that. It doesn't work that way. Continuing. When we brought our daughter home after she was born, we didn't set her down and tell her the fridge and pantry were stocked with food and to help herself anytime she got hungry. We didn't set a plate on the table for her at meal times and hope she showed up to eat it. She wasn't physically mature enough. She needed milk, and she needed it to be fed directly to her. Likewise, Christians don't just come to maturity unless someone is helping nourish them. We'll stop right there just briefly. The idea that, most Christians, that is kind of it, of like, all right, come on in, we've got some opportunities for you. If you're really hungry for it, you will grow. If you're not, you're just going to get this maintenance kind of nutrition that the church is giving you. And so telling them they're expected to learn more, offering them the opportunities, taking them under your wing, especially the elders and the ministers, but really any mature Christians, bringing them along so they have somebody they can ask questions, having somebody show them how to have a devotional life, things like that. That's how you feed a newborn Christian. Not, all right, the food's there if you need it. And so I just think about how this is so often done, and it might be a new Christians class for a short time or whatever the case may be, but that development from newborn to standing on their own in maturity, that's going to take a lot of that hands-on kind of work. So, of course, we'll talk about that some more as this chapter develops. Continuing, how do we do it? In practical terms, then, practicing the Great Commission means walking people through the process of maturing as a Christian. Disciples are handmade, as some have said. If you are a mature Christian, pray that God would help you choose someone or two or three someones to disciple. Tell them you want to help them grow in their walk with Christ and ask them to get together with you regularly to study and pray. Teach them what it means to live for Christ and let them know that you expect them to grow to the point of exercising their gifts to strengthen the church. As Jesus gave the limited commission and used it to teach the 70, help them find ways to live out their Christianity and be there to walk them through the questions and challenges that arise. It's in this kind of relational format where specific questions can be answered and the disciple can be helped along at their own pace. Once the disciple begins to mature, bearing fruit and showing a Christ-like people-mindedness, they must be taught to continue the cycle. The end goal is not to keep feeding them forever, but to have them turn and feed others. Keep an eye on them, be there for them, and of course pray for them, but launch them to do the work in their own right. A couple of things, a reader right after the book came out pointed out the limited commission there. I was referring to the wrong event. That was not the sending of the 70, but a time of sending out the 12. And so a little bit of a mix-up, but Jesus did send 70 out to do their work and then bring them back and speak with them. And so that idea still holds. The other side of it is the end of disciple making is not always going to be becoming a disciple maker. Not everyone's going to be a teacher. We've talked about that in a number of these episodes. For a lot of people, though, it is going to be some kind of people focus, serving others in some way, standing on their own in maturity and having their own walk with God, and then being part of the work of the church in some way. It might not be sitting down and having Bible studies. It might not be that kind of thing, but it certainly needs to be something where they are plugged into the church of the work, plugged in the work of the church into the people around them. And so, again, that's going to take developing them from point A to point B, and then so on and so forth. Not just something that we're going to expect them to do on their own. All right, picking up from there, it says, if you're a church leader, I couldn't urge you more strongly to structure your efforts around disciple making. This is going to mean starting smaller than some might like. Since it can't be done en masse, choose faithful men, 2 Timothy 2:2, and make time to meet with them or build them up. Mature Christian women do the same for faithful women. You can do it one-on-one or with 3 or 4 others. Don't make the group too big, though, or some will be hesitant to open up and participate. If you're someone who wants to get started but don't feel ready or able to disciple someone else, that's fine. You can start by doing two things. First, pray for and be looking for a mature Christian who can take you under their wing. Ask them to meet regularly to pray and study together. Second, start imitating Jesus. Start looking for people to serve, encourage, evangelize, and love. God blesses the efforts of all who want to do his work, and the processes will grow you in thinking, seeing, and acting like Christ. One kind of, not a change, but an addition, I guess a footnote I'd make to this is very formal in itself. It can be a little programmatic to say, all right, I'm going to find 2 or 3 people and get them together in a study and bring them along. In fact, we tried that at a congregation I was working with, and to a degree it worked and helped some of them along. Others weren't really fit for that format. It didn't really carry. And so the question is, does it always have to look like that? I think one of the ways you can make a disciple is having people in your house regularly and talking about the Bible with them. It does not have to be a formal Bible study, but just that kind of shaping people through life. And in the same way, when you look at Deuteronomy 6, How you raise children in the faith is when you rise up, when you lie down, when you're walking in the way, when you're sitting in your house, talking about God's law with them, talking about the Word with them. And with your kids, there's those opportunities, and you talk about their life, and you see what's going on, and you have those personal conversations. It's very similar. Not that people are your kids, or you should treat them condescendingly, to another adult like they are your kids, but that you just share life with them, and around the table you have the opportunities to talk about your life, about the scriptures, about the church, about the things that we do. And so it doesn't have to be necessarily as formal as what I've outlined here. Either or, there's going to be a time and a place for both of those things, and you can kind of determine who's ready for what. Some people, the more informal way is a great place to start with them, and that's a great way to bring them along. So, just I don't want it to look too programmed here, as it seems like in the text maybe. Continuing on. What do we teach? There's plenty of discipleship curriculum available, and you might find one that suits you well. Don't overthink it too much, though. Put simply, teaching people a kingdom-focused Christ-likeness comes down to helping them learn 3 things. They need to know how to walk with God, building a devoted life of prayer and study that leads to spirit-driven growth. They need to know how to love their church family, serving and contributing to the building up of the body. And they need to know how they can reach the lost through prayer, love, and truth. That's it. It's easier said or written than done, of course, and will take time. But on the other hand, it's not a complicated process. As a mature Christian who follows Christ, it can be as simple as teaching people to do what you do. This is one where I'm going to really part with where I used to be on this. In fact, I'm preaching a gospel meeting this week, and tonight's lesson is going to be on this side of it. If you look at that is very spiritualized stuff, your devotional life, your church service life, your evangelistic life. There's more to life to that, though. That it's not just those things done in the spiritual realm, but you go out into the real world where we're not Gnostic. You have a life here. You have a job. You have obligations to people around you. You have relationships and neighbors and coworkers and friends and family and things like that. And so the idea of making disciples who make disciples keeps it in that spiritual plane. But when Jesus says teaching them to observe all that I've commanded, it's going into the physical realm of their life, and it's teaching someone, here's how you can be like Christ in every facet of your life, as a husband and father, as a church member, as a citizen, as a worker, as a whatever it is that they are, that here's what Christ would do if he were in your situation. And so when we talk about everyone becoming like Christ and the church being little Christs, it's not we're making everybody into evangelists, although there's going to be a lot of people evangelizing, Lord willing, that gift that he gives, and we can all invite people to come and see, and those kinds of... I'm not downplaying evangelism, but if you notice, this is, A, where I'm departing from my own thinking, but B, this is a way I've departed from all of the disciple-making literature, the culture, that there's kind of this subculture within Christianity of the disciple makers. And I noticed after a while, they don't talk about nitty-gritty real-life stuff. They don't talk about marriage and kids that much. They don't, and you'll find some stuff here and there, but they don't talk about navigating this culture. They don't talk about the issues. In fact, they're very against the issues. Like, hey, stay away from the issues and just preach Christ is one of the things that you're going to hear. That's not you teach the full counsel of God, and you teach people to observe all that he commanded. That wasn't just during his years on earth. I mean, we're teaching people to think the way God thinks, and the Old Testament factors into that as well. You have the Proverbs that teach about very practical ways of living life, and it's when you get into those that's where controversy starts. That's where people will feel their toes stepped on or whatever. That's where Christ-likeness sets in. That's where we get challenged, whether we're worshiping him or we're worshiping the gods of the age that turn us into all kinds of other things. And so with this one, again, that is just, those things are right, but those are the spiritual, like in the church, in your prayer closet parts of your life, not what you do Monday through Saturday necessarily. I mean, evangelism, is outside the church building or whatever, but as far as you're not doing this all the time. So what do you do with the rest of your life? That's where the teaching of the church really equips people to be Christ-like. Carrying on, I shared the story earlier in the book about sitting at a ministry conference and needing a mentor instead of a lecturer. The same is true for each member in the pews. As I sat and learned and longed to be able to ask questions and share my specific struggles, that's what the Sunday listener needs too. We can tell them to read the Bible and pray, and we can even have classes to teach them how to do so, but they need someone to model it for them and answer their questions. We can push, prod, and beg people to evangelize, but what they really need is someone to help them feel equipped to do so. We can have someone in for a week to teach on marriage development, better parenting, or financial wisdom, and those things can help, but what Christians need more than anything is someone to walk them and guide them through these challenges. Anyone who has had the blessing of having a mature Christian in their life to help guide and counsel them through life's challenges knows what a blessing this can be. A speaker can give all kinds of good information, but there's no substitute for someone who knows you well and has godly advice, exhortation, and even correction. It's a beautiful human relationship, and it's the kind of relationship the church was built to produce. The world of education teaches us the same lesson. It makes a great difference to the student to have involvement from a parent or a tutor who pushes them toward achievement and helps them along the way by explaining the concepts and takes the time to answer their questions. While they learn from the classroom and can read the textbook for themselves, it's a huge boost to their learning to have someone walk with them at their own pace. Disciples need that same kind of care. There have been studies done. There's literature out there about kids in school, the ones that have parents who follow up on the homework, who read with them, who keep it going outside of the classroom, are the ones that thrive. Like the statistics of success and higher grades and achievement and scholarships and all that are through the roof when there's involvement from somebody who cares about them and wants to see them develop outside of the classroom. If it's just, all right, go to class, learn while you're there, and then whatever else, they don't go very far. Well, why do we think Christians would do much different? The other thing about it is, when you bring people to maturity, that doesn't mean they're going to outgrow the need for spiritual mentors, for elders, for teachers. Not everyone's going to grow into an elder. Not everyone's going to grow into a teacher. You're going to have that where they're going to be looking up toward those in the church throughout their lives to some degree. That's okay. They need to have that relationship in place to know who they can look to and where they can find answers. All right, continuing. A full departure. How we go about equipping people will determine what people think it means to be a member of the church specifically and to be a Christian more generally. We're either teaching them that being a Christian means showing up and then going home to live out a private faith life, or that being a Christian means taking responsibility for emulating Christ as an interconnected part of God's family. If we're going to go back to the start and seek to reap different results, then we have to sow different seed. Though the ideas espoused in this book might be new to some readers, other readers have probably read similar thoughts in this growing discipleship movement. I'm happy to be just one of many calling for a return to a discipleship-driven, relationship-oriented churches. It's a great encouragement to me to see so many moving in that direction. Where I hope to add to the discussion is in this. I hope I've made the case for a complete departure from the business model of disciple-making. Unfortunately, a sort of hybridization is already happening. As discipleship becomes the new buzzword, the rise of the discipleship program as one of many programs has begun. As we discussed, the end goal of disciple-making should be to unleash people to do the work of equipping, encouraging, serving, and loving, not return them right back to a scheduled, programmatic, checklist version of church. To go back to the restaurant analogy, it makes no sense to put the time in to teach people to cook, and then go back to just inviting them to keep coming to the restaurant. Obviously, we're still going to gather on Sundays, and I'm not advocating abolishing class times or special events. But what we put forth as church life must shift from scheduled, building-centered, event-based Christianity to life-based obedience to Christ. For the same reason, I advise great caution in depending on small group ministries. By this, I specifically mean the program in which the church is divided into smaller groups and assigned to various meeting places in place of Sunday night or Wednesday night gatherings. I've been asked the question as I've discussed this book with others and thought it to be a necessary inclusion in this section. It's a fairly popular practice, and this is the answer many have turned to in an effort to get beyond the limits of lecture-style events. Frankly, the small group method is exactly what it would look like if someone tried to shoehorn the biblical need for community and disciple-making into the business model. Though there are great benefits to scaled-down meetings, more personalized learning, better opportunities for relationship building, it can still easily fall into consumerism since it is an event put on by the church, organizationally speaking, rather than an organic action taken by the spiritually mature. And it can lead to checklist Christianity since it's a once-weekly event. Like the traditional Sunday and Wednesday events, people can complete it, check it off a list, and move on, having completed church for the week. In the work on the modern school system, longtime educator John Taylor Gatto argued strongly against timed class periods marked by the ringing of the bell. His contention was that the ringing of the bell taught children by implication that learning is to occur during those periods and should be brought to a halt, regardless of progress, when the bell rang. Similarly, if church is a scheduled thing with a set start and end, people learn by implication that such fulfills their commitment to church. Jesus' example, followed by the Acts church, was to do such activities as a part of life rather than as a scheduled event. If community and biblical discussion are a timed event on the church calendar, that unintended consequence becomes a factor. Once again, we should frame everything by the original goal of equipping people to imitate Christ and build each other up. If we were starting from scratch, would that be the solution we would devise, to bring people into smaller meetings, have them participate in some discussion, and go home to live out their week? Much like the Sunday and Wednesday events, that doesn't mean we need to get rid of such groups. We just have to make sure that if we're doing them, that they become a launching point for greater connection and responsibility, rather than an end in themselves. All right, we'll stop right there before concluding. The idea of the full departure, the idea of getting out of ways we've done this, it does bother me when you'll see that, again, the discipleship buzzword, and you just see everyone, make disciples. I want to be a disciple. This, that, and the other thing. Like, if that just looks like having Bible class, like Sunday morning, like you've always done, we're just, again, playing the buzzword game. This needs to be a change in how we do things when it comes to making disciples. And so a full departure, I'm not talking about, getting rid of our building. I'm not talking about you can't have Sunday morning class, or even if you have small groups that you've got to cancel them or whatever. The main thing is, if you want to get there to this closer church, to making true disciples, things like that, it's going to have to be handmade, close relationships, things like that. And I think the greatest place to start, especially within the leadership of a congregation, because if the leadership doesn't do it, it's very hard for this to permeate the culture, is just hospitality, having each other in each other's homes and talking about the Bible together, sharing God's word together, because hospitality's hard. And even when we do hospitality, the easiest thing to do is talk about, boy, we've been having crazy weather. You see that game last night? Boy, what's going on in your life? How's work? Like things like that, which are good. It's fine to make small talk. It's good to know what's the latest in somebody's life, but gathering around the Word together, praying for each other, speaking spiritual things, following up with the sermon, whatever the case may be. And sometimes there can be, the church can provide prompts of like, hey, let's get together and talk about the sermon, or follow up on those kinds of things that you're already thinking about together, whatever the case may be. But if this is not something that we're practicing on our own, or because we want to, because it's like what we do as people, especially as church leaders, it's going to stick to the building. It's going to stick to the programmed version. It's going to stick to the streamlined, all right, let's check the box and say we did it kind of thing. When you're sharing, real life thing across the kitchen table with people, whatever the case may be, and just saying, I want to get to know you better. I want to talk about the Word with you. I want to, help you in your walk. Then that's the kind of full departure I'm talking about, of where are we expecting the growth to come from? Well, that's the best bang for your buck. That's where we need to be putting our efforts, our time, things like that. So what it looks like is going to be different in every congregation. I was a little younger when I wrote this. The idealism was certainly there a little bit more. This is a more difficult thing, a slower thing than sometimes you think, but it's also a thing that if you commit to and you put in the time, you start to see change, you start to see growth, things like that. So, just work at it, keep working at it, adapt as you go along. I can't give you all the answers right up front because every situation is a little different, but you start to figure it out as you go, just as anything else in life, like riding a bike. All right, finishing up. We must keep the main goal the main goal. We can't measure success by numbers in the directory, attendance on Sunday, or even participation in our functions. Success is the steady development of the people in our family to maturity that leads them into full participation in the work of building up others, reaching the lost, and glorifying Christ. Everything we do must be evaluated with that goal in mind. So many of the things discussed here are not wrong. There's nothing unbiblical about lectureships, small groups, or any of these tools. We have to understand, though, that a trade-off will be made. If our church culture is building, event, and expert-oriented, that will set the tone for what the body thinks of as church life. Those things we do that are consumer-driven send a mixed message and hurt our ability to reach our goal. How we teach is just as important as what we teach. When I was a kid, we must have played a dozen variations of the classic game tag. One of my favorites, though, was the version where anyone tagged by the person who was it joined them in being it. The goal was to be the last person standing, which got harder and harder as more and more people got recruited into tagging others. This is the model Jesus left us. Go tag someone else with the Great Commission until they can help you tag others. 1 turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 8. I hope you'll spend some time in thought, study, and prayer on this topic. Then I hope you'll act on it. Point people to Jesus and show them how to follow him one disciple at a time. Questions for this chapter. How did Jesus teach his disciples? How did Paul teach Timothy? What would it look like for us to follow that method? Again, those are people that were kind of in that role of teacher, of elder, of apostle, whatever the case may be. And so not everyone's going to have the same looking thing, but I do think there is something to, if you really want somebody to get it, you do have to put an arm around them and walk with them. How does the concept of reaping what you sow apply to our methods for making disciples? Think on that one a little bit. I'll leave that one with you. What would you need to learn to start making disciples of Jesus? Again, as I've said, there's a little bit of a mindset shift there of not everyone's going to be a quote-unquote disciple maker. Not everyone's going to be a teacher, whatever the case may be, but it also doesn't have to be that formal of a thing. You know, I think one of the most beautiful versions of being a disciple maker is when the older couples at church take a younger couple under their wing and they're just there for them for parenting advice, marriage advice, just, you know, having them over, being in their life in that way. You can be a disciple maker like that. It doesn't have to be sitting down and going through a Bible study program or something like that. So what would it look like for you? What do you need? I know it can be intimidating. Just care about people. Know the word so that you know that what you're sharing with them is accurate and true and what God would have them know. But yeah, just put that time in and you make a big difference there. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I've been pleasantly surprised to see the podcast download numbers. I thought we'd have about 5 people interested in listening to this. So I appreciate everyone who has tuned in. I enjoy doing them. I've gotten some really good feedback. And so I really appreciate that. As always, be sure you're subscribed to the Focus Press YouTube channel, the Church Reset podcast feed. I think I told you about the book or the Church Reset, as always, Amazon Focus Press. I'm real bad at doing the plugs and all that, but you know where to find us. Support us in our work, jackwilkie.com, for all of my latest. And so I'll sign off with that, and I'll talk to you guys next time.